meeting to order. I sent out sort of not so much a draft as a kind of an outline of what we might write up. One thing I did do in the section on the budget, I emailed those first two paragraphs to Chris. The first paragraph was about what the budget guidelines were, and the second paragraph is about the exception that was made for the police department and the fire department. I wanted to make sure I had wording on there that was accurate. And so Chris looked them over and said, yeah, those are both accurate. So we can go with those two statements to explain a couple of things.
So, John, question for you.
Yeah.
So I get the letter from the school, public schools. Am I missing something? Do they fail to tell us what they want?
What has happened with the school budget is back in April, there was a joint meeting of us and the select board and the school committee. And they sent out copies of their budget, or what they were looking at for a budget at the time. And so we had that first meeting, and then we came back with a whole host of questions for them, information we'd like before we started to do.
And they were like 800,000 shy or something?
Yeah, 700 something thousand shy.
Yep.
So they wrote back. Well, actually, Adam didn't just write back. He apparently went to whoever the finance subcommittee of the school committee is, and I don't know what happened at that meeting, but at any rate, Adam wrote back with answers to the first handful of questions, but it was all the easy stuff, and the substantive things that we wanted to know about the budget, it never answered. They followed up with an email sometime later saying, is there going to be another joint meeting? And we just kept asking, we need the answers to these questions. Another email came, and again, no answers to the questions. So the time has passed, and nobody has called another joint meeting. We certainly didn't call one because we didn't have the information that we'd asked them for three times. And the select board didn't call for a meeting. So my understanding is that they've had a couple of budget meetings and they had a public presentation. And that at one of their budget meetings, the one on, let's see, I guess the one on.
John, they're having one tonight.
Yeah, they're having another one tonight. They had a budget meeting last night. That was with the public, right, Bob? I think. Yeah, but they had a meeting a week before that, in which it looks like they actually approved and voted on the budget that we and Chris have agreed on, what we think the budget should be, without any of the extra amounts. But at the meeting they had with the public last night, they didn't mention that. They instead apparently presented material that said they were about, I think it was $450,000 short from what they wanted.
Which the letter doesn't say.
No. And also, yeah, and it doesn't say that they voted to approve the lower budget. So I don't know what is going on with their budget, except that if they're going to amend the budget at town meeting, they're going to have to amend what they already approved, or else have another meeting before that and approve a different budget. So it's the usual. Not only do we not know what's going on with their budget, it's hard to believe they do.
Well, it seems more than usual, more confused.
Yeah. Plus,
actually, you know what happened, John?
you know,
We concurred with the school committee because we voted after they did. We voted to approve the same budget that they had, so we concurred with it. with their desires.
I guess that's one way to look at it.
And the letter has another mistake in it. Well, it says that at the joint meeting with us, but they don't mention the school, the select board. I mean, they were there, right?
Yeah, it was a 3-committee joint meeting.
Yeah.
But the email went to Chris, didn't it?
Yes. That's
So
what
I guess-
that's what's on the letterhead. Yeah.
Yeah, so that would, I guess that's how they go about inviting the select board. And they
Well,
didn't send anything, they didn't send it to the finance committee either. We got it as a forward.
We never got anything from them as the select board never got anything from them. And here's the thing that occurred to me, based on what that letter said, it should not have gone to Chris. It should have gone to Lynn Mercier as a town moderator. Basically notifying her that they were going to amend the budget.
Well, no,
So-
they don't want to amend the budget. They're looking for some money before they get to that point.
Or
That's the way it
maybe
seems
they
to
would
me,
like
too. Yeah.
another look at at their budget. But now the other thing that's going on is that I checked with Chris, I checked with the town treasurer, and neither one of them had ever seen anything about these extra funds that the state has allocated to the Granby school system. Yeah, Bob, when he watched the video of the last couple of meetings, said that mention was made of 2 or 3 different figures, some of which apparently has been spent this year. We don't know how that's going to go through their accounting books. Some of which is allocated for next year, of which a piece of is supposedly reserved for some particular kind of activities, and the rest is to be used freely.
This is the COVID money?
Yeah,
COVID?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but we haven't heard anything officially about that. And as far as I know, neither the town administrator nor the town treasurer has heard anything about it. So this just gets more bizarre as it goes on.
Okay.
So
So who's on first?
yeah, well, let's just go back to our write-up.
Okay.
I don't know if you got a chance to take a look at it. I used kind of a boilerplate or a template from 2019, and it's basically the same format that we've used all along. I based it on 2019 because that's closest to the pure format that we've been using. I was making comparisons between the 2021 budget and the 2022 budget and the 2020 budget, because there was such a mess of things that were happening on the income to Granby. Remember that the income at budget time to Granby had been cut by quite a bit of money. And we wound up having to use basically all the free cash. I think we did use all the free cash from last year to shore up that shortfall that we had in state funds. So that, but then during the year, we actually received more money than the state funds that were allocated already by the time of our annual meeting. So more funds came in. I don't know the exact figure, whether it was all that was originally thought or whether it was going to be less than that. But it's sort of immaterial for our purposes, in that from comparing budgets to budgets, the expenditures are okay, but the income item is just it's ridiculous. We can't really compare it. But I think and so I said I was going to compare things to 2020. But I think that I had some conversations with Bob Simpson. I think that I'm much more comfortable now making comparisons on the expenditures to 2020 and just mentioning in passing that the income items are a little unclear because of the way things happened last year. Normally we compare budget to budget, not actual to budget. And I don't like to break that tradition very much. of comparing a budget to budget instead of actual budget. But but I don't mind doing that all and going back and getting the 2021 monies and use that for the comparisons with 2022. That was a little long-winded. Was it clear what I was talking about?
Yeah, I think the COVID piece clearly, plays into that, John. So.
Yeah, I'll mention, I kind of hinted at that in one sentence where the financial aid in fiscal year 2021 is so unusual, the comparisons to it are meaningless.
Yeah.
And I kind of leave a sentence like that in and just talk about the expenditures. Okay.
I have a question, John.
Okay,
Has the important person read this yet?
not yet.
Your
Not
wife?
yet. It's still in too, I know who you're talking about. It's still too rough a draft form. So it hasn't been edited for.
The final grammatical.
Yeah. But if you're okay with the overview page, with me substituting in some figures where we have them for 2021, although there really won't be any there, just to eliminate the 2020 figures. So it'll shorten that a little bit. But if we're okay with that, let's go on and look at page 2 on the budget and see how we feel about all those paragraphs there. And I'll tell you about a couple things since we did this. Like I said, the first two paragraphs, I actually sent those to Chris to find out if the wording that we're using there did in fact reflect pretty much what was happening during this past year. And he agreed that that was pretty much, that was correct wording to use in those two paragraphs. Now, the third paragraph, I've now got some figures and I've changed that as follows. Now it reads, the total budget for fiscal year 2022, parentheses, less additions to the stabilization, close parentheses, is $23,742,319, which is an increase of $1,047,590 over the budget approved for fiscal year 2021.
I gotta ask you where you got the 23 million from.
Yeah,
Since I gave you a different figure earlier.
I had a chance late this afternoon to go and work up the budget sheet that I've usually done earlier and given out to everybody, and didn't do it this year. But I now have it done, so I'll send that out after this meeting. But basically, if you look at the cover page to the budget recap page, on it's the first page of the budget that we get, and in the email that we got sent that has from Chris, that is entitled fiscal year 2022 budget summary and notes. If you look on the first page of that, then what I did it in a different fashion, but basically what I'm doing is the following. Looking at the income items, and the income items include $6,528,335 from state aid. The next figure is $199,825, and that's from the tax levy. The next figure is a combination of free cash, money that's being allocated from the stabilization funds, other available funds. Other available funds is basically the road money, the chapter 90 road money, And that's $1,796,594. And then the prior year growth, $658,000 roughly there. The enterprise funds, we're taking $728,000 out of the three enterprise funds to contribute there. And the one change that I made was this. The local receipts are given as $657,936. This is what was used for local receipts for the original budget that Chris sent out that had the $15,000 for the select board. We changed that $15,000 to $10,000 and change. So I made that adjustment in the income side also, and I just made it arbitrarily in the local receipts. So the figure there for the total revenue is 23,910,586 minus the adjustment I mentioned. And to that, I added, there is no borrowing. Stabilization fund is covered above, free cash is covered above. Enterprise funds are covered above. Let's see. What is the other figure? The other figure is, hold on just a second. Stabilization funds, free cash. Oh, actually, if you subtract out the 15,000 for the select board and add back in the 10,000 something that we put in, that then adds up to the 23,905,781 for the income that we've raised. So then when I filled out the rest of the template for the display that I've usually done, and the expenses matched up with that. So this total revenue that we have of $23,905.781, that's what the budget is. That's what we're spending. That's what budget. Now it includes $163,462 that are being put back into the three stabilization funds, about a third in each fund. So when you subtract that $163,462 from the 23,905,781, that's where I get the figure of 23,905,781. Does that
No.
help?
Your math didn't come out right at the end. You said it was a 23,910 less the change or the reduction in the selectmen's salary budget. That gave you 23,905.
23,905,781. And then,
Right.
and then from that, I subtracted $163,462 because that's money that we're putting back into stabilization funds. And it's a figure, it's comparable to the figure that we've always carried as the operating budget. You know, putting money in the savings account, I've never really counted as a budget expenditures.
And shouldn't that serve to reduce the 23,905?
Yes, that reduced it to, well, let's see, what did I say? Yeah, that takes it from the 23,905 to 23,742,319.
Okay. And on that basis, then the you're treating the retired teacher's health insurance as if it was being paid out of as an appropriation, when in reality, it's just an offset.
Yes, we're spending it. Yeah,
We're spending it, yeah, okay.
yeah. The other offset, which was done this year, is that it's on the sheets of the fiscal year 2022 notes. On that page, the debt exclusion that we have to pay for, basically for the schools, the amount we have to pay is $804,479. But there's an offset of that from the bond premiums. And that's all there. That's all there on the first page of the fiscal year 20 notes of $12,959. And on the budget recap sheet that is on the top of the, it's on the first page, Chris carries that net amount, which is $791,519 as the debt exclusion amount, rather than the whole amount, and offset it by negative borrowing, which was sometimes done in some past years. So that's the only other offset that I can really find that we're doing here. So at any rate, that's how I changed that figure, and I have a comparison then to the actual amount that we spent in fiscal year 2021. And then in the next paragraph, the amounts spent on general government are, and I've changed that figure to $10,458,492 for operating expenses, of which $2,566,946 is for the schools. That's the school offset. And I'm going to go back and look at the large capital items, because I think when I took the first stab at putting that together, one of the warrant articles is $200,000 for paving. And I'm not exactly positive, but that strikes me as not a capital warrant article as it is an operating warrant article. I don't think we're buying things with that. I think we're doing paving. I mean, probably buy stuff to do paving, but I think that's operating, and it's similar to years ago, and I'm talking 20. The police cruiser used to be thought of as a capital item for the budgets, but we all noted that every year, a new police cruiser was bought. And so we made the decision to switch the police cruiser out of what we consider a capital budget into the regular operating budget. I mean, something that happens year after year after year is indistinguishable from operations, is what our theory was. So, but now similarly on this 200,000, I think I had included originally in the capital expenditures, but I think I'm going to move it to the operating expenses.
So John, do we have, like, I know like in my world, we have definitions of capital expense versus just general expense. You know, capital expense typically is anything that is, we're depreciating an asset over time, like a cruiser. Where paving, you wouldn't be depreciating an asset. Do we have definitions or no?
I don't know if that happens anyplace on the books. Bob, you might know.
Well, the capital improvement committee has a definition for stuff that goes before them. And it's got to be an expenditure of more than $25,000 and a useful life of more than 5 years.
But there's no depreciation, right?
Pardon?
There's no depreciation.
No, we don't take depreciation. Yeah. But if you're talking about a road, obviously if you go out and redo a road, it's going to have a useful life of greater than 5 years.
Right.
On the other hand, Christian, in the way he put it down, he's showing it as just as a warrant article, not as a capital article.
Yeah, so that's why I don't really think of it as capital, even though it lasts 5 years, because they do other stuff. I mean, all the stuff they do, a lot of stuff lasts more than 5 years, and yet the highway department isn't listed as a capital expenditure for all those things.
Yeah, see, I would see like a boiler, you know, as a capital expense and paving as a general expense, you know, but it's just different ways of thinking, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm sure that Mass General Law someplace defines capital, but we've used our own definitions. The town has used its own definitions for terms of putting together the budgets.
Okay.
Rich, when I laughed, it was because I've been in your place before.
It
Doesn't make sense, Scott. It just doesn't make sense.
right. We have to eventually we learn to forget about it making sense and go with what is traditionally the meanings of things are for the budget.
All right, I'm good.
It's like when Bob and I talked to the bylaw review committee, we made the point that there are a lot of things which we think of as being the budget. For example, all of the warrant articles that involve spending money. If you're spending money, we think of it as the budget. But in the way things are presented to the town meeting, those are not presented as part of the budget. They're presented as warrant articles. So here's something we want to spend some money on. Let's approve this much for this, that, and the other thing. And yet we take a look at it, we include it in the budget, we include it in our budget, certainly in the budget estimates for what we get spent. But technically it's not included as part of the budget. And we didn't press that point to this point of saying that when you talk about the budget, that ought to be what you're talking about also. We didn't feel it was worthwhile to try to make that point, because that is probably a little bit harder to understand than a lot of people would think. So, but you get used to it. You get used to it.
Yep.
So I've still got to come up. I may make changes of $200,000 in those figures to allow for the switching of the paving to really be an expenditure, operating expenditure rather than a capital item. Now, I got another thing. The next one says the amount spent on all education items in the budget is $9,916,156. I was rushing through to get something here on paper so we could take a look at it. I'm not positive whether I included the funds for Pathfinder in that. So I've got to go back and double check that figure and look and see what that is. And the figure for this operating expenses for the schools of that, the 2.6 million, that is the correct figure. Then, I was in the go paragraph, sorry. Then I got the sentence that the amounts spent on all education items in the budget are 9.9 million for operating expenses and 800,000 for repayment of the loan to fund the schools. And I have in the capital expenditure item for the schools for the pickup truck. I think we'll probably
A lot less than the lawnmower.
Yeah. And I think probably
Sorry.
we can leave that. Let's see. I have additional. Oh yeah, the Smith locations. There's some question as to whether the $51,598 for the pickup truck is going to become part of the general government offset expenses. In the Mass General Law relating to these things, it talks about maintenance expenses of more than $150,000. So it's not clear whether, because this is less than $150,000, even though it is a truck, pickup truck, it's not clear how the law treats that for general government expenditures for the minimum net school spending. That's something I'll ask Chris about and see what he says. But I think for purposes of this budget, but it's not going to change our budget this year. Would
So
change.
John, I'm assuming this is a replacement for an existing truck and not an additional truck?
Yes,
Okay.
actually, John, this is probably not going to be purchased by the general government. It's going to be purchased by the school department.
Does the warrant article, will that specify that?
Pardon?
Will the warrant article specify that?
Probably not, but somebody has to be in charge of the expenditure of money, and I can't believe general government is going to be picking out the pickup truck that the school department is going to end up owning. Or using, I won't say, we'll forget the word owning.
Yeah, well, I would have thought that they'd go and pick out well, they've already, apparently, I would suspect they've already got one chosen because they've got a price on it here.
Yeah.
Very little bit. So I would suspect that they would choose it and then give the bill to Steve Nally to pay.
Well, if that would mean then that the school committee approved it and they had the authority to do so. The question we were talking about earlier is whether it's a net school spending item, regardless of whether it's paid by the town or by the school.
Right.
If it goes in, if a pickup truck is considered normal operating equipment, it probably is net school spending, and it just needs to get added in to the figures as net school spending rather than as something outside of net school spending.
Yeah.
If I could chime in for a second, I think the issue here is that we developed this like town buildings, public buildings sort of operation where we hired a guy to run it and everything else. And this truck for $50,000 is in the public buildings budget because it's related to the maintenance. Although we're talking that the school needs it, I'm assuming that since it would relate to the function of the public buildings department or whatever it is,
But it doesn't.
that's why they put that as a line item there instead of in the school budget.
Didn't
No.
they get a van last year?
No.
We've
Okay,
got
let me
two
ask
pickup
you this.
trucks this year. We got a pickup truck for public buildings, we got a pickup truck for the school.
Yeah, and neither one of them are in anybody's budget. They're in the warrant articles.
That's right.
Okay, but right here,
Not part of the budget.
one departmental 192
That's public
5804, and it's an article, it says $49,806.58 truck. So this is the public buildings, and public buildings is code number 192. And I have no idea what page number it is in the documents that you guys provided.
It isn't going to show up anyplace other than right there. But there's a
Okay.
separate article. It's for the school department for the 51,000.
And you're saying that's nowhere in the school budget?
That's nowhere in the school budget. It's just a separate warrant article, but it's for the schools.
So then is it a capital expenditure for the schools?
Yeah,
Okay. So is that under the capital improvements group? Is that where that's being funded then? If we're buying two
that's what it
trucks?
was recommended from.
Okay. Well,
Joe, what are you talking about a truck in the public buildings budget?
okay, in the public building, okay, the
Department 192.
budget request fiscal year 2022, all those pages that we went over I put them in a booklet, so I went here and if you go all the way and scroll up, it's code number 192. It says budget request fiscal year 2022 public buildings, wages, expenses. And then below it itemizes everything. And if you look on the second page of the public buildings, if it's printed out for you, or at the bottom, if you're in the spreadsheet, it's 5804. So it's maybe 10 to 15 from the bottom. And right there, it says 49,000 truck. You go across 49,806.58, unless that's truly into last year's budget and we haven't stuck it there. But I thought that somebody had said that we didn't buy it last year, so it was rolling into this year. So that's my question, because I believe.
We bought a van last year, Joe. We bought a van last year, and it's red. I see it parked all the time up
Okay,
in
so
the
we
center of
paid
town.
that 49,000 last year. That's all I'm asking.
We were
Okay.
against the van last year too. As I
We
recall.
were against the van and everything else,
Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot more. Yep.
and the lawnmower.
Okay. So I'm not sure, because easily that could be last year's expenditure, but I remember, and it could be some other line thing about something, we didn't spend it last year, so it's gonna float into this year.
Joe, I'm still at a loss. I cannot find that figure in anything for 2022.
Well, no, I'm saying it's not, I just realized, because the printout on the second page did not print the columns, that 49 is 2021 right next to it. Okay, I just found that, so I could be completely wrong, because that's there. I just remember somebody saying that in capital or whatever, there was something that we were gonna buy last year in 2021, we didn't, so it's gonna go into 2022. And is that the truck?
Let me answer the question, I think.
Okay,
All right, if you go to the second page of the budget summary,
yes,
which is where the notes are, up under school capital, the very first item is pickup truck, 51 grand.
mm-hmm,
You come down under general government, the, what is it, sixth or seventh item is public buildings truck, 73 grand.
okay.
So
So we're
that
still, so we are, Bob, so we're buying 2 trucks.
we're buying 2 trucks, one for the use of the public buildings, one for the use of the
Okay.
school department.
Okay,
Right.
okay,
And neither one of those are carried in their budgets.
yes,
They're carried as warrant articles. So the
Okay.
question is, so one of the questions is how does this transaction take place? Does the school write a check for this, or does the treasurer write a check for it? The treasurer may write the check anyway, but who writes the check for it? But the second thing is that, an independent of whether or not the general government is writing a check or the school is writing a check, it's a school expenditure. And so whether it's a school expenditure that the schools are spending, or whether it's a school expenditure that the town is expending, is it something that is classified as one of the net school spending items? That's what has to be determined. We don't know the answer to that. I'm gonna try to ask Chris tomorrow.
okay, so if we did that, then based on the gap we have in the budget, or is that related to the state? Maybe it doesn't impact that. Does that, will that narrow, that won't narrow the gap, their $450,000
No.
gap?
No,
They don't,
Okay.
it's not showing up as part of what they consider their operating budget to be.
Okay, but from a state standpoint, in terms of net school spending or minimum requirements, if it went into the budget, then that would count if it went in as an
don't know.
operating expense.
we don't know yet. That's what we're need to find out.
Okay. Okay. Does that matter, John, this year? I mean,
Not in the
we
budget.
already hit our net school spending number?
Oh, yeah, no, we're way over net school spending. We always are, because the the thing that every other town spends that we spend, if you want to compare towns, is the retired teachers' health care. And that technically is not part of the ledger where they calculate the grad school standing because of the mistake the accountant made 20 some odd years ago. But it's real money. People have to pay it out. We don't have an option on it. So it's like everybody else. We're way over minimum. This would
Okay.
add to what we're over minimum, but it doesn't. Neither of those affects the budget for this year.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see. The next item I have is
Stop in, John, to interrupt you and go back 1 second. You said there's one large capital expenditure. Is 51,000 really a large capital expenditure for somebody that's spending $10 million?
No.
It is.
But it is, I thought about what our options are. First of all, the reason I said large is that it falls under the purview of the Capital Improvement Committee to look at, to approve. And they do not look at small capital expenditure items. So I think everybody can agree mostly on what a small capital expenditure item is, but there could be some disagreement about a large capital expenditure. I use
Okay.
large because it has to be approved by the Capital Improvement Committee.
Yeah. Well, it is 0.5%.
Yeah, but if I don't put any adjective there, we just put the capital expenditure or as such and such. We don't know that because they probably have small capital expenditures in there. You know, you buy computers, that's capital expenditure.
Okay.
That's something that. So I would prefer to leave it in because I don't like leaving it out. But I can change it if you feel it. You feel there's a better word.
I made my point.
Yep. And we agree. I go back to the observation that sometimes logic is not intended to rule. The next paragraph, it doesn't have to be there. I just put it in there because it just occurred to me that it could be something to explain. That was, and in some sense, you know, people wouldn't necessarily realize that. The kind of the real point that I make here, that we make every once in a while in the annual report, is that the fact that we sometimes have a pretty large chunk of free cash at the end of the year is not because we didn't realize that there were things to spend it on, or not because it could have been spent kind of willy-nilly on anything you wanted. It's because the way the financial budgets have operated for Granby for years and years and years is that in the springtime, May, June timeframe, there's a town annual meeting. And at that annual town meeting, we approve a budget for the following year. But every year in the spring, or almost every year in the spring, except for the last couple of years, we have at least one special town meeting. And at the special town meetings, we then really kind of clean up the budget. You know, one way to think of it is we kind of clean up the budget. There will be a number of things which were rejected in the beginning of the budget process because we've always approached the finances conservatively in town. And yet there are things that really should be spent. And there are a lot of things that come up during the year. Sometimes some big things, some projects being worked on, some roofs have happened that way. So that when spring comes around, we really finish up the budget process for the year. And the only way to pay for that, unless you're going to borrow money for a project, is to use cash you have. And so it either means you put the money earlier into stabilization funds, or else you use the stabilization fund money. You could go through a convoluted process of first putting it into stabilization fund money and then claiming you're using stabilization fund money for the process of expending funds later. But that's not really necessary to do that. So I like to remind people every once in a while that there's more to the budget process than just the annual meeting, and there's more to the town budget than just what's approved at the annual meeting. So we can leave it in or take it out.
Just a point, John. You said we usually do it. That's something that starts with the town administrator or the board of selectmen.
Right.
And the last time it occurred, the last time we used a special to put it into the stabilization fund was, we'll say, 2 fiscal years ago. And since then, at the annual town meeting was when the money went into the, and that's where it's going this year too. So the point on the use of free cash is fair. Just, we shouldn't get too hung up on the fact that the money going into the stabilization fund comes as a special. It's now 2 years in a row coming at annual.
Yeah.
Excuse me, 2 out of 3 years come. There wasn't any last year.
Okay. Leave it in, take it out.
Leave it in.
I'd leave it in. Yeah, I'd leave it in.
Okay. If anybody has any suggestions for any changes in wordings on this stuff, if you try to write them up tonight and send me an email about them, or write them up tomorrow morning and send me an email about them, I would appreciate it. I want to get everything in a final form to mail out before our meeting tomorrow night, so we can see what appears to be the final form.
You skipped a paragraph up there.
Did I?
Yeah, the budget proposed for schools for fiscal year 22.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with what you wrote, but the override vote occurred in May of 2004, so that it became effective in fiscal 05.
Okay. So I thought the vote had been in 2004. May. Okay. Good. Effective.
So that's 17 years ago?
The vote, yeah, it's hard to believe.
So you have it written as 13 years.
All right, where is it written 13 years? Thought I took that line out.
Yeah, I don't see it in the copy I'm looking at.
Yeah. Joe, are you looking at the article? I just mailed it out. I
Is
mailed it
this
out.
the old one? It starts with the budget. So you had an overview and then it starts with the budget, an economic perspective on school expenditures.
No.
Yeah, Joe, I think you're looking at the old copy. The one John sent out last night does not
Okay.
mention the 13
Okay.
years.
Oh, yeah, okay, I didn't print out the new one.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, what you're looking at is the template that I used, but I
Oh.
made a bunch of changes in it, and so it looked more
Okay.
current. Some of the figures were, and I think I took out the 13 years, and I
Okay.
added.
Okay.
Okay,
Yep.
if we're okay, those first two sections, we can move on to the considerations for the future. Here, I really didn't write very much, except that I asked Chris for an update on the 23 million. And in a minute, I'll tell you what he said. I asked him for an update on 23 million because that one goes back a few years. And what he said was that as of the end of last fiscal year, end of the 2020 fiscal year, 6/30/2020, our OPEB liability was $34,036,418. Now, I'll tell you what, it's just you almost just have to laugh.
What are those benefits, John? I read that article earlier today, or that piece, and I'm not looking for, every detail, but what are, other post-employment benefits besides, pension and health insurance?
Pension is not included in that.
Okay.
It's health insurance, and I'm not sure what else is in there. There's nothing as big as health insurance in there.
A little bit of life insurance.
Little life insurance probably for retired employees. The far and away the big thing is health insurance.
So this has nothing to do with the Hampshire Council thing? Our share of that?
No. This is our.
This is just Granby?
Yeah, it's just Granby, and I put this almost little joke in there at 175,000 to 23 million figure. I got $175,000 a year. That takes 131 years to pay off. So it's more than just the lifetime of all Granby residents. It's more than the lifetime of all current Granby residents and everybody who's going to be born in Granby in the next 30 years.
How old are these people going to live till?
No, we're not putting enough in a year to fund it over their lifetime.
That thing's going to run out of money at some point. Now, here's what's going on, I think. I think pretty much everybody in the state, all the cities and towns in the state are in pretty much the same position. The relative value of it is going to change, but they're all pretty much in the same position. Nobody's been funding this. And everybody in every city and town realizes when they see these figures that it's like us. Well, at the rate we're going, 130 years, we'll pay off today's current liability. Or actually, we'll pay off the liability from 4 years ago. So everybody says, well, we can't do this. There's just no way we can do this. We'd have to close down half of what the town does and half of what the school does to be able to fund these things. So everybody's expecting that the state is going to ride in on their horse and say, oh, we're going to take over this. We're going to save the cities and towns. We're going to take over this. But the state has never given any hint of doing that. And you got to stop and think, where's the state going to get the money? The only place they can get it is from the citizens. Same place, the only way the towns can get the money from the citizens. So it's not really going to be a saving event if in fact the state takes over, but I've heard nothing mentioned about the state even thinking about being willing to take over this unfunded liabilities. They've got their own unfunded liabilities, the state workers. So, just moving from Granby to another city isn't going to help anybody. All cities are in this position. This is a massive amount of money compared to what we usually spend.
Okay.
That's why big companies, have done away with a lot of these things in the private sector because, they could never deliver a balance sheet that was investable, carrying these kinds of liabilities on their books. That's why, big companies, UPS, FedEx, people like that have done away with a lot of these types of forever and a day, benefits.
So defined benefit plans, is that what you're talking about, Rich?
Yeah, when I look at, a lot of, like if you look at like what happened to the auto industry, one that's near and dear to my heart, Ford, General Motors, Chrysler, they had to basically battle with the unions to get rid of these pension plans and not just really the pension plan, because, you know, people earn a pension, but the forever, you know, health insurance benefits that went along with them. Because, you know, we have, you know, Medicare, Medicaid, and then private insurance for people to purchase on their own. And Ford and General Motors were funding that for, you know, the life of a retiree. But when, you know, they instituted that policy, the life of a retiree was, you know, maybe 50 years old. And then, as you know, we get to an average, you know, lifespan of 78 years. And, you know, I know it went backwards a year last year, but typically goes up. You know, those benefits, you know, just go forever.
A lot of companies still do promise health insurance for retired employees. And I've read some things recently that there's a lot of speculation that wondering when the time is going to be right for major companies in the United States to start pressing the government for universal health care, because the ones that would benefit the most are probably the companies, rather than having to pay that themselves. If there were universal health care, then the government would pick it up, and then the funding of it would come through taxes. But that would be the way the tax law works. That mostly comes from individuals rather than corporations. So we could be seeing that coming. There's no move afoot right now that I know of, but there is a lot of speculation about it.
Yeah, I just look at those liabilities like that, and, you know, your question's a good one, John. You know, in there, I mean, it just, and it's not unique to Granby. It's every city and town in the Commonwealth. So.
Well, although one wild card cost is that any of the retirees can also bring their spouse onto the health insurance program after retirement. So if two people worked and they were all under different systems, and we have a more favorable system, then the spouse of the Granby employee, if the Granby program is more beneficial, has more benefits, then you're going to join the program, even though these individuals were never employees of the town. They were just spouses.
Right, and I think that across the whole United States, I think that fits in not just with cities and towns, but with companies too. There are, as you know, untold number of small businesses in the United States, and a small business includes people basically working on their own, in whatever occupation or they find to their liking, and all of those people pay for their own health insurance. They are the company, if there's company contribution. If there isn't, they're paying for their own health insurance. And if they're working for somebody else who provides a health insurance for only while you're working and not afterwards, then you get switched over. But eventually, people are going to go looking around for any way they can latch on to some partially paid health insurance. Partially paid is by somebody else. So it's been a mess for a while. It's going to continue to be a mess.
Most companies, though, John, you know, like I know my own company and my wife works for Holyoke Hospital. You know, I cannot be on her insurance anymore. It is for employees only, unless I didn't have health insurance. Same thing with my health insurance and my work. Unless she does not have health insurance, she cannot be on my health insurance.
Yeah, so maybe one area that we could impact would be that, and I don't know if adding your spouse to the Granby employees' retirement health insurance is still an option, but if it's still an option, then one way of reducing our long-term liability is to eliminate that option.
That's easier said than done.
Well, of course, it's easier said than done.
Well, no, I mean, it's an issue of having to take it to the voters. Because whatever authority we have to issue insurance comes from adopting sections of the statute. In Granby, I'm not sure whether a spouse of a retired person can join or not join after the person retires. But if there is a spouse, the coverages or the subsidy or the contribution, whatever you want to call it, by the town only lasts as long as the former employee is alive. If the former employee passes away, then the spouse can stay on the plan, but at full expense.
See, South Hadley doesn't work that way. I know that factually. They can stay on for their life too in South Hadley.
Yeah.
The state plan, which is what the Granby teachers are in, is also that way. In fact, I'm trying to think of what it is. The state, under the state plan, the state or down to the municipalities reimburse the retiree for the cost of Medicare. Part A. B.
Because they want them on the Medicare plan because they get the Medicare rate.
I don't know about that. I would say it's more like they tried to find as many ways as they could to soften the cost of health insurance.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, at one point, I had an uncle who was retired, had a pretty good job, and he was the spouse of a woman who had been a teacher and she'd been retired. And he got not only and she passed away, and he continued to get the Medicare contribution as well as full health insurance benefits. And the rates that they pay or that the state pays or allows or charges back to the municipalities is a higher percentage than we'll say what we have in our town, which is only 50%.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like, I know you've mentioned it, John, in past meetings, is there needs to be an architect of a financial plan for the town, not only, a year from now, but, 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. And when you look at these liabilities and the changing demographics of the town and the needs of the town, there really has to be, an architecture built to plan that out. And I just know we don't have the people to do it,
Yeah. But hoping that next year, the finance committee is supposed to be building a financial plan for the town. And I think it would give us the opportunity to bring a lot of these questions to the public forums and raise them as issues, which Granby has to be looking at. Already what we know, there's no way that we can offer a solution to a now $30 million problem. But we will be able to make people realize that we may think this is easy money to get money out of the stabilization funds, but it's not. It's not. There are a lot of things which Granby is kind of on the edge of. And I think we'll see that. I wanted to put together something about what the growth in government expenses has been, percentage growth of government expenses. Put it in here someplace.
Well,
and to see what that.
Yeah, well, we missed our true saving opportunity. We should have taken everything last May and dumped it into Amazon.
For Bitcoin.
We'd be halfway there already, guys.
Yeah.
Anyway, I know we can't do it, but it just sort of struck me the craziness of the market, and that was really the solution to our OPEB problem. So anyway, okay.
Yeah. So maybe we vote in the part of the bylaws what some of the powers of the town treasurer will be, and let the town treasurer invest this money instead of the local banks that lend us money. Take a flyer on the stock market.
Well, it would have paid off at this point.
Yeah, and back in 2007 and 2006.
Yeah.
Batch
Oh, yeah.
of-
Well, it's all overinflated. I mean, the leverage in the market is just insane. We talk about national debt, but I don't know. I read some number. I think the market leverage is 160 trillion right now, or some unbelievable amount. So anyway, okay.
Back
So
to the
what's next?
back to the article.
Yeah.
One, I wrote these down just sort of ideas. I not in my own mind certain that we should actually be writing out paragraphs around these things as opposed to just leaving the questions there for people to think about.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them, and
Okay.
the full paragraphs that are there. One of them is I think we probably ought to mention this OPEB liability because it's been increased by a lot, and just put that out there as one of the problems that we have to face us. And then this last paragraph, I put it on here as verbatim from the 2018 narrative that maybe you use this coming bylaw to put together a financial plan as the jumping off point for getting the select board to appoint a committee that actually takes a look at these things. But that, it's got to happen. We're just proceeding merrily along, of increasing the services we want and saying how we're going to pay for it. Well, let's use stabilization fund money.
Yeah, we have no plan on how we manage really manage the expenses. I mean, we just don't. I mean, 2 years in the budget process now with the committee here, we just don't have a plan. And every company I've ever worked for in my existing company, there's a 5-year plan and everything is tightly controlled. And there's I know we have fixed revenue or certain fixed revenue pieces to our budget, but I don't see where we're looking at expense control. And again, going back to Bob's spreadsheet from a week ago, I can't tell you one department in any company that I have that's been their budget increased 100% in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen in
Right.
the private sector. It just doesn't. If you want to have a healthy balance sheet that is investable, so I hopefully they do appoint committees or something to do that, John, because it's needed.
Yeah. The other thing that people seem to think there's a knight in shining armor out there waiting to save us is that besides thinking that surely the state is going to take over these unfunded liabilities, the OPEB liabilities of towns, there's always the thought, well, gee, let's just start attracting industry to Granby. Well, we have a very small section of the town that's on sewers. We have a very small section of the town that gets water other than from wells, I think. You're not going to attract anything other than something like the CVS store that we have when you have no sewer, no water. It's just not going to happen. And we rejected it because it would cost the town a lot of money to put in sewers. It cost the town a lot of money to put in water. But without that, these things aren't going to happen. And so we were going to attract some businesses like CVS. And what do we get? What do we get from CVS being in town? Well, what we get is the value of their property they pay property taxes on. That's it. And that is going to be of a modest size compared to what you get in industry, because a real industry is going to have much larger building and much larger needs for the water and the source. So anything which is a small business and wants to build, that's great. That can come to Granby, but that's not going to get us much more than building an expensive house on the plot of ground.
Well, Yeah, I was just gonna say that, you know, when I look at this in this discussion, I mean, the real reality industry is different. I mean, you know, it's all about if we had the greatest, latest, best internet infrastructure, you know, the bandwidth, everything else that could take us to the next level. And I thought about this and I said, well, because it's a bloody fortune for 57 miles to dig any kind of connection throughout the whole town, and for business, you wouldn't need it. You know, what would it take to be the fastest, broadest bandwidth in the area? And could we put sort of a business facility, zone it, do something in development or something, so that we also, you know, made sure that we always benefited by, you know, by looking at something down around Five Corners, you know, because I don't see putting sewer in the whole town or other areas, and I don't see how that's going to bring us much business. You got breweries over on New Ludlow Road, you know, maybe the other growth industries. We got a lot of farmers with land, and we became a, God forbid, marijuana growing town that had its own sort of cooperative exchange that we could generate money. But I don't see how you could grow enough to, like, you know, wow, you know, maybe you make $50,000 or $100,000 in taxes. I mean, that's still not significant. So I don't see the business thing as a solution. You know?
Yeah, you have to have, if you really want to, given that our tax base is property taxes, what you really need to do is, if you want to make money, is you have to find a way to bring in a business that you wind up in a partnership with. That's essentially what went on with the landfill. Basically, we were a partner, and small partner, but big for us, partner in the landfill business, because depending on the business that they did, we got more money. It wasn't just based on the value of the land. And so that's why we could pull in $1 million a year extra year after year, because we were basically a business partner of the business. But how do you find businesses that work like that? Well, electric companies can be one.
Well, it's really too bad we weren't, if you look at deregulation and telecommunications, in some ways, it's too bad that somehow we didn't end up with the Granby Telephone Company, because that would have given us other opportunities to, I mean, it's not going to happen, but, you know, you sort of look at, that was one of the biggest existing businesses in town, you know, for all those decades. So.
Yeah,
anyway.
I mean, you know, when you think about the town and its attractiveness to business, we don't have sewer water, as John said. And look, we're not close enough to any major highway to make it accessible for warehousing or anything like that. I mean, I plan warehouse space all the time, and, you know, we're always looking to be, you know, within a mile of a major artery. And, right. You know, Granby's not. I mean, we're 7 miles. So, you know, when you think about, you know, our town, and then you think about, you know, attracting people to our town to build more houses and bring more revenue that way, you know, there's the offset expense of, you know, education and that goes with bringing those people to town. So I just don't see a business solution, at least that's evident to me, for Granby, unless, you know, it's a server farm, you know, that is housing, you know, servers for some you know, some company or something like that. And again, we don't have the land really to do it that's usable in a lot of cases. Yeah. People would allow it.
And yet the myth persists, and I think it will persist until sometime when a study is done that has some credibility, and we have the town leadership basically promulgating that study. That's right. The only thing.
Think about our new businesses: dollar store and CVS. I mean, you know, that's not a recipe.
We got a post office and a bank.
Yeah. Well, we've had the
Cindy's
bank for a
thriving.
while. Yeah. So, okay.
Yeah, it's a big question, I mean, and John, hopefully the select board does, take a look at kind of some long-term planning, because right now there isn't any real, clear solutions.
All right, back to the considerations for the future. What are we gonna do with this?
I've got a little bit of a problem with the comment about the schools per pupil cost.
Okay,
Their cost really hasn't gone up in the last 3 or 4 years. The increases were all prior to that, the really large ones. But if you look at the charts that I sent out on
Sorry. Okay, I'm back.
the per pupil cost back in 2016 was 14.5 in round numbers. And today, it's a little less than 13.5. And if you make the adjustment for the stuff that was left off I say today, fiscal year 20, make an adjustment for what changes were sent in on corrections, it brings you up to just about $14,050. So for 4 years, we've held the line. The real problem occurred from, let's say, 8 to 16, something in there.
And that probably had something to do with the needs for change in technology and teaching, as our world changed too. And I don't know the specifics. I wasn't involved then, but I know in the private sector we had a lot of cost changes, in the last 15 years because of technology changes and what we needed to run the business, as opposed to the way we used to run the business, with fax machine and things like that. So a lot has changed, and those things cost money. So I don't know what drove that per pupil cost up in those earlier years, Bob. I'm sure you would, but
I don't. I know that one thing that occurred was whatever school choice money had been sitting around got all put out into the budget to take care of whatever was desired. In other words, there probably was not a lot of cost consciousness going on.
Well, and let's not forget, in 2008, we had the financial meltdown. So some of those decreases, I don't know what the financial impact on the tax base was in those times, but 2009 and 10 were certain. I don't know if those were bad revenue years or if state changed policy on spending, but anyway.
Why don't we just leave the end of that sentence off?
well, first of all, here, let me again remind you that I just put these things down here as ideas to get us thinking about what ideas ought to go into here.
Okay.
And for example, I think probably the better thing perhaps to think about in our school costs is this. There's this whole question of whether or not Granby can actually afford to retain high school. And independent of the cost of educating the students, if you take a look at the physical building, we know that we're not allowed to just improve the physical building. Any improvements that would do there would bring it past the 30% of the value of the building. And so we would really be looking at building another building. Well, we had a project a few years ago to look at building a building to replace the high school. And that cost got up over $100 million. Now, $100 million, even if the state even participated at the 60% level, which I don't know if possible anymore for Granby, we're talking about $40 million that we'd have to raise on our own. The current expenditures that we borrowed for the middle school is like about 13 or $14 million. So we're talking about this $800,000 that we're paying to pay back that loan. We're talking about quadrupling that. So go from 800 and add another 2.4 million. Well, how is Granby going to raise $2.4 million extra a year? We can't raise that much. That takes us way beyond what the maximum allowed is. So what are the options for running a high school? Well, these portable classrooms. I'm not sure that is a great alternative to having school choice operate with another town that'd be willing to educate Granby kids as part of their operating system. And I'm not proposing that as a specific solution. I'm proposing as one of the kinds of ideas which should be looked at in light of what people are going to have to realize is going to be the cost of keeping high school education in Granby. It's going to be enormous.
Yeah, the only way you ever fund a new, I was involved back then, and it was a bad time in the financial world for people to take on that expense, and that was around the time of the financial meltdown, as I remember. The market was in the toilet, things weren't good. We had a lot of things, nationally in the news that I'm sure made people think twice about being willing to spend that money at that time. But as I thought about it, there's always the school of thought, if you build it, they will come. If Granby was zoned such that, we had, more new housing starts and more subdivisions going in. I mean, Granby's an attractive commuter town, from, travel to the Mass Pike or travel to 91. It's far enough away, but not too far. But we just don't. And it's almost impossible to envision being able to build that school, unless you got the population, somewhere in, the 10 to 12,000, kind of person range, where you had significantly more residential taxes coming in.
Well, the basic tax rate of Granby is a neighborhood of $13 million. Then this additional $800,000 for the school loan. If we wanted to raise an additional $2.4 million, that's 20% of what the taxes are.
Yep.
So you add 20% more population and hope that your other expenses now don't go up. But that would be if you could keep your other expenses the same. Well,
right.
The first expense that's not going to be kept the same is the school expense.
Correct.
So
it's leverage. You got to leverage your expenses. You can't cost more for police. You can't cost more for plowing. You can't cost more for anything else. You have to leverage all those expenses, understand there's going to be a cost associated with additional students in the schools. But, you would have to be, building homes such that had a higher tax value as compared to a lot of the homes in town.
John, there's maybe another problem too. And there's a maximum amount that we can raise our taxes to. And we're getting closer to that number, and I'm not sure, but 20% might throw us above it, which means there's no way that you can have an override for the full amount.
Yeah. Joe, maybe you better work on finding somebody to give the authority to put our money in the stock market.
Really? Hey, now we're talking about, we got OPEB, we got the high school building, I don't know. anyway. So,
All right, so should we change, should we include something about the schools, but emphasize more of the cost of, the capital cost could be required? Or should we just
I would
eliminate-
just say the long-term education, the long-term educational costs, something along that lines, John, and I could try to wordsmith something and send you a note, but I agree with
Okay.
Bob on the per pupil cost. So,
Okay.
something around the long-term costs of educating our students.
Okay, sounds good.
okay.
The, maybe, trying to think in here, this question, can Granby attract any meaningful sized businesses with minimum water and sewer services? Should we just leave that stand as a question?
I think it's more of a statement. I mean, I know it's posed as a question, but I think it's a statement because, and I don't know what happened to the water project, that we discussed a couple of years ago, going up 202 and up Morgan Street. I don't know what's happened with that.
I think it caught COVID.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think it was one of the fatalities of COVID. But
Actually, it was a fatality, I think, more of the state. Let me tell you some of the things that I'd heard. There was a state project, still a state project going on at the same time. And so when this plan was originally proposed to bring water in from South Hadley, part of the whole plan was, which they talked about with the state and everything, they agreed, was that we would piggyback on the state doing their renovation work around 202 and do it at that time. And the reason is that if you didn't do it then if you had to dig up a newly paved and renovated 202 in order to pour in water lines, you'd just be throwing away all the money they did and paying for it yourself to do it again. So instead of doing that, they're going to allow us to get this done before the actual paving was done. So some bids went out kind of simultaneously for a lot of the work to be done, both by the state and by Granby. And the state at the time even agreed that we would have in-kind expenses, administration, stuff that we done here in the highway department, other things like that, that would amount to quite a bit of money for the project, and the state would credit us with having spent that as an in-kind expense on this project. Well, then what I heard was that someone made a bid on this project, and they made a bid to come in as the low bidder, but they did it in such a way that everyone felt that they way underbid on the state's part, way overbid on Granby's part. And the state is approving the thing based upon the state's cost. And so all of a sudden the thing was out of control for our costs. And apparently we complained to the state, and they did agree that this was not a proper way to go about getting this work done and funded. So something happened after that changed that. But the end result was that everything got looked at, and all of a sudden Granby's in-kind expense was taken away as being a credit on the project. So there was a big mess up actually between when things were originally proposed and the way they were discussed to the way it ultimately ended up as being what we needed to be done. Now, I don't think it's been actually killed yet, but it's pretty close to it. My understanding. I could be mistaken, but that's my understanding.
So the paving and the sidewalk portion, that was the state piece, is that continuing, John, in the reconfiguration of Five Corners?
Yeah, there's an awful lot of flags and paint markings in the street down there, and it's going to get done fairly soon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then the other piece of it was that the people that they got to bid on bringing the sewer line from South Hadley, what Granby wanted to do was to run the water line underneath the creek, whatever is up there. And the contractors wouldn't agree to that. Instead, they wanted to put a line in over. And so that wound up you know, being much more costly apparently to do something like that. So it was a mess. You know, the pieces all worked to conspire against us being able to bring in the water line at a reasonable cost. And then there were some questions about whether or not South Hadley was still agreeing to the same thing we thought they were agreeing to before about the water usage. It was just one mess up after another. And I only was told pieces of it and over time, bits and pieces of it. So I can't speak with authority on this, but those are my recollections of the bits and pieces that I was told about from time to time.
I think the old saying, there's no such thing as a free lunch, probably applies to this project. We thought
Well,
we
it
were
wasn't
gonna
going to, as it was, I think our cost was going to be $1.2 million, the original cost. But then things got out, you know, our net out of pocket after the in-kind, but then things got out of control.
Sounds like a good idea to start with.
Yeah, to start with, it did.
Hey guys, I have another meeting I have to go to. I often have, it's 8 a.m. in China right now, so I have
Okay.
get on a call there, but I will be back on tomorrow night.
Okay, if you jot down any notes, if you get a chance, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll send you a
Thanks
note
for-
on the school piece, and we'll go from there.
Okay, thanks, Rich.
Thanks.
All right,
Take care.
so, the rest of us, the question about the tax increase to bring the junior high school up to standards is that's really kind of a question that maybe to get folded into the whole issue about what are the education costs going to be. I think we got to keep in this notice about the OPEB liability so people hear about that. And maybe with a little reworking of the wording, you know, just sort of this almost a plea that this stop being run by myth and start being run by some facts. Put together a group of people who can put together something that the select board can say to the town, this is the way it is. These are the facts of our life now.
Actually, the selectmen are probably going to appoint a committee to try to deal with the HVAC problem at the high school. So that maybe the task ought to go a little bit more than just that one problem with the school. Because when they decided not to place the $4 million thing on the warrant, there was a decision, I believe, that they would form a committee to try to figure out a solution to the problem.
So Bob, is the $4 million, is that like when they wanted a new roof and they didn't even get the right quotes and then it turned it out that they just repaired it?
The 4 million that was proposed, what was it, John? 4 million, 8 or 9 million, and 13 million?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that all of that left out what it would trigger in other expenses for bringing school up to code in various ways. But just
Maybe not. We don't really know because we didn't look, you couldn't tell from their quotation, but it was done by the firm that had been what, the OPM on East Meadow?
Maybe, I don't know, again, those details, we were never in any meetings where the details were
No.
discussed. We just quick conversation with Chris about it. But the thing was is that the expectation wasn't that it was going to cost 4 million. The expectation was 9 million.
That was the most likely budget.
Most likely budget was $9 million. And somehow that got translated into the 4.5 million. That was their absolute low figure for cutting every corner possible. But they didn't think that was going to happen.
They'll end up a day late and a dollar short.
Yeah.
Or We're many days late and many dollars short.
But once again, I hate to see this. The town is being asked a question and they're being asked the wrong question. The question is not how can we pay for an HVAC system for the high school? That question is way down the line after the questions that should be asked. The first question should be about the basic structure of education and the basic structure of the schools that we have, the basic structure of what it's going to take. That's got to be the first thing. And only after you answer that, do you start generating the individual questions. Well, okay, how about the HVAC part of that? What's that going to cost? But that's just one part of a larger thing. And if people are lulled into thinking that an HVAC system in the high school is going to make the world sit up and rejoice at Granby school system, well, they're perhaps more in tune with Joe's weed factory than they are with financially.
And what did it cost us to build that school? $1 million, $2 million, something like that?
Back in when was it built?
Back in, I think, 65, 64. That's when it was someplace in there in the mid 60s. So
Yeah, well,
early to mid 60s.
yeah, a new car back then cost about $2,300.
Yeah.
So
I bought a 1964 Corvair, $2,500, pretty red
Yeah.
rag top.
Was that before or after Nader said it was a bad idea?
I don't know. I can't really remember other than his saying that it was a bad idea. But I never got rear-ended to find out.
So we doing this again tomorrow, John?
yeah, and tomorrow we need to have the final copy tomorrow night.
Of our report, right? Okay.
For our report, yeah. So I'll try to work on this a little bit and get another draft out. I hope to be able to get some of it done tonight, so you can see at least parts of it. And other parts, whatever I get done tomorrow, I'll send out before the meeting. And then we're just gonna, and by the way, as I was thinking about this, I myself am not at all opposed to just having a very short section for consideration in the future. I mean, I was throwing out a lot of ideas for things we might talk about, but
Yeah.
I don't feel like we need all of them, particularly after this conversation tonight. It seems to me that more of a concentration on that there's something wrong with the way we're going about solving problems. We're not solving the correct problems in order.
Asking the big questions without trying to give it solutions, I guess, right?
Yeah.
John, just as I don't know, an overview or a question. How I had suggested putting something into the report about our approval of the bylaws or approval with the amendment.
Yeah.
And that isn't in. And then there's a question of notifying the school and the selectmen of the fact that we couldn't go along with what they wanted. How would you plan to handle those things?
My understanding is that Chris was going to tell the select board last night about the final budget. I think the select board with the new selectmen, I think, met last night. I haven't heard anything or seen anything, but that was my understanding about that. The school apparently voted the budget that we voted. And as for the bylaws, I thought that the place to do that was to talk about it when the bylaw motion is introduced, when we first talk about the bylaw motion, that it could complicate matters of putting that in here about what the pure financials are, which are independent of what the bylaws are.
So
And
can
so
we do something? Can we do something in writing? I think that maybe before that we could hand out at the meeting if we're not going to do it in writing before.
We could, but what Bob was suggesting, though, is merely say that we had conversations with the bylaw committee on the parts about the budget and the finance committee, and that we were basically in agreement with the stuff that was written there. And that seemed to me to be, a fairly simple statement. Could elaborate a little bit on that, but I didn't want to put it in here because I thought this really is more of the financial piece. The bylaws are sort of the mechanisms for how the financial piece is done rather than the financial piece itself.
Okay, John, yeah, quickly, the question that I asked you yesterday about putting things that would also be job description type stuff. We talked yesterday about that going into the new bylaws. And so then how would that affect, so you're hiring like the town administrator and you've got a job description. And now part of that job description is in the bylaws. And I kept thinking about this. So does that mean that if it's in the bylaws, that's the only thing that has to be done by the town administrator? And that if you want to change something, do we have to modify the bylaws before we can change it in the job description?
I think there's language in there that the town administrator also, the select board can ask the town administrator to do anything that they specify during the year. But it puts in some specific sort of things. And I think when I read it, I think the closest thing to a real objection was that on some of the things, they're done without any oversight by the select board. And most of the stuff I think should be that way. If you're going to have a town administrator, you got to give him or her the authority to do certain things without always going back and checking with the select board. They have to cede authority to the town administrator for certain kinds of things, but not other kinds of things. The one thing was that the ideas of, for example, appointing police chief without select board approval, appointing fire chief without select board approval, even appointing department heads who are clearly so important towards running the departments of the town. I'm a little iffy on those things. That I think maybe they've given away too much by giving away authority over those. And the authority is not for running any of the offices. I don't think the select board should have the authority to run any of the departments. But I do think that there are elected officials that somebody has to be watching out for, have an overall view of what's going on. So the giving away approval authority on some things is okay. Giving away approval authority on other things, I'm not real happy about. That's going to have to be a discussion at town meeting.
Because so right now, is it the town administrator that's negotiating the police contract and the fire contracts?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. I think there was a select board member on the group,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think the town administrator was involved.
Okay.
And
I believe the board of
Giving away hiring authority, so we're involved in the contract, but the town administrator hires the police chief? I mean, we've never done that before.
Are you sure that that's in there?
I don't know. Here, let me pull up my booklet and go to the.
Because I sort of think that that the police chief and the fire chief are both hired by the Board of Selectmen under state law, not under town bylaws. But I can be wrong. Just like when a police officer is hired, he's brought before the Board of Selectmen, not before the town administrator.
Now,
Yeah,
let me, give me a minute here. Let me search my computer for something I'm looking for.
I'm not gonna bet on my Bitcoin that Bob's wrong.
Well, Bitcoin was down today.
I think he's correct for today.
Yeah,
Just a
it
second.
says the town administrator shall appoint, section 3, the town accountant, highway superintendent, police chief, council on aging director, constables, fire chief, building inspector, tree warden, town council and special councils, conservation commission, council on aging, historical commission, and any other commissions, committees, boards, or offices under the town administrator's direction and supervision in whole or in part.
Yeah, and those are the kinds of things which
I mean, before you go, John, I just want to make the point, that I've always felt is that, and with transparency, so with everything, I mean, we've ceded total control to one individual. So maybe we need to move from town administrator to mayor, so at least somebody can elect somebody and have some kind of decision-making power, because they're appointing everybody. The one individual is appointing everybody of consequence that's in the general government budget. So anyway.
We should really have had a different outlook on the salary for the Board of Selectmen.
it's down to zero.
That was zero.
Yeah, it should be paid. Yeah.
No, that's, that was the other way I thought about that was that if all this authority is given away by the select board, then what we ought to do is probably just abolish the select board and once a year have a by town vote appoint a committee to review the work of the town administrator and either renew his contract or not renew his contract, because that's essentially all that's being done is renewing and not renewing a contract.
Okay, so here's my question. In the previous bylaws, is this also in section 3? So it's been something we've been doing for a long time? Or is this new? This language I just read, I don't know what the
I can tell you, it's gotta be language that's within the last 20 years, because there was no town, or even less than that, because there was no town administrator prior to that.
Yeah, but my real question is this new? Is this appointment authority for all of these people, is this new? Versus it's been going on for 10 years, but we just haven't focused on it. I don't know.
Can we ask Chris tonight or tomorrow and then get an answer tomorrow?
No,
I can-
we
I
want
can
to, no, we
Go
want
down and
to,
get my bylaws.
yeah, no, we want to ask Alan Wishart and the committee. Okay, that's who we want to ask about this. Is this new or not new? Okay, we don't want to ask the town administrator. So anyway, because they're the ones writing the bylaws. That's who we should go to. So, okay, so I've just made my feelings known about giving absolute power to the town administrator, guys. That's all. That's what I see this as. Total abdication of responsibility, of any power or control, of any checks and balances. So, okay. I've said my piece, so.
All right, I just got up the previous version of the bylaws. Let me see if there's anything.
Okay.
There's no section on a town administrator. Let me see what the town moderator or selectman.
So might something like that, the town administrator doing that, John, might that be under the select board
That's what I'm
bylaw
trying.
section on the
That's what
old
I'm
one?
trying to find.
Okay.
Select Board of Selectmen shall appoint pursuant to Mass General Law, blah, blah, blah. A town administrator. The town administrator may be appointed for 6 terms of office. Town administrator shall serve as the chief administrative officer under the Board of Selectmen, perform the duties assigned by the Board of Selectmen, and shall not perform any function that has not been approved for the town administrator by the Board of Selectmen. And that may be it. I don't think that there is anything else. I don't think there's a section, there's not a section on a town administrator. There's a section under the budget process that talks about what the town administrator is supposed to do in the budget process. And then that is it. This is all new. And as it is, for example, what it is doing is inserting a section of the bylaw that basically is a job description for one person in town. Not for
But
anybody
it
else.
becomes a bylaw.
Becomes a
It's
bylaw.
not in the job description that you can, with the select board, just vote or unvote. Okay, maybe it didn't work out. Once it's in a bylaw, you got to go through a whole process to basically take away that authority.
To take it away, yeah, the selectmen can, I think the select board can add authority. Let's see.
No,
Does the new bylaw say that it's what duties the selectmen give to the town administrator?
No, the authority is that they can appoint an administrator. The town administrator serves, chief administrator officer under the direction of the select board shall perform the duties assigned by the select board.
Okay,
And-
don't go any further than that.
That's the first, shall perform the duties assigned by the select board.
Okay,
Well, let
How-
me finish. Let me finish. And shall not perform any function that has not been approved for the town administrator by the select board or these bylaws.
okay. Well, the point that I was trying to make was, how can you, by putting into the bylaw that he can appoint the police chief, how do the selectmen say you're not running the police department? In other words, it's almost as if all those duties that would be assigned to him by the Board of Selectmen are being assigned by the bylaws.
yeah, and he's and he appoints the highway superintendent. I mean, every critical department, you know. I mean, I understand, you know, people don't really want to run for tree warden anymore. I mean, I sort of get some of those smaller town functions of getting efficient, although I still think it should still be the select board that should have the authority and decision, because otherwise, why even negotiate a contract? If he's the town administrator, you know, I mean, the police chief comes in, you got the regular contract, and it just doesn't make sense to me. Because like you said, Bob, he's now really, except for the school budget, he's in charge of everything. It appears to me of any significance, for sure. So anyway, I'm just on principle opposed to that, that's all.
Oh, listen, you know, we don't have to get that decided tonight.
Okay.
We can come back next week and talk more about the bylaws. We've talked about a bunch of bylaws, and you saw the email that I sent to Chief Wishart on
Yes.
most of the non-substantive stuff. And I said to him I would get back to him. I promised before that I would get back to Al and to Lynn and to Chris before the town meeting, so they could see what it is we're thinking about doing and talk about whether there are any legalities involved. And I intend to keep that promise, but it doesn't have to be done tonight. We got to finish up the budget piece first. But then I think it's worthwhile to have a conversation about this and exactly which pieces of these things we've got some discomfort with and how we would suggest changing the wording. Because at this stage, it's going to have to be words added or subtracted to the bylaws.
Well, I say eliminate section 3. It was
Well-
never in the previous bylaw, and it's everything in control. I say you eliminate that. You know, I mean, that's what I would vote for. I just think that this section 3 is really a significant altering of how our government is run and where the center of power of town government is.
Yeah, I'd like to be clear about my own thoughts on this, and that is that I do not mind at all if the town wants to get together under the appropriate auspices and debate and argue and examine whether or not we currently have the government structure that we need for the town. We may in fact need a strong town manager. We may in fact need a mayor. We may in fact need a different kind of function of the select board. But I don't think this should be done by slipping it into the bylaws. I think that's the wrong way to go about changing the government structure of the town. And there's no mistake that this changes the government structure of the town. And if the town wants to do that after having discussed it in context, that's okay. But just in the context of here's the new bylaws, and we're not even having a special meeting for it. We're going to throw it in as article, whatever it is, at a town meeting. I don't think that's a good idea at all for the town.
I could be comfortable with wording that said something that the town administrator has the authority to appoint the department head, boom, 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 of those departments that he's gotten the authority to be in charge of.
Well, he is in charge of the fire department and police department, isn't he? Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Oh.
Because
I think he is.
there's something in there that says the duties that the Board of Selectmen give him. Don't those duties contain the ability to be in charge of the police department?
I thought that the select board, under the current bylaws, have given the town administrator the running of
No.
those.
I don't believe it's under the bylaws. I believe it's under a set of regulations or procedures that they've adopted.
Yeah, well, that's okay. They can do that.
And they can take it back.
Yes. But they
Yes,
won't be able
whereas
to
if
take
you
it back.
write it into the bylaw, they can't take it back.
Right.
Not without voting to modify the bylaws.
That's correct.
Because it's just like when you, not because we need to sort of move on, but it's just like when you read section 2, the last sentence, town administrator's job to implement and manage policies, programs, and procedures that have been implemented by the select board. It doesn't talk about any of these other things. So you can already see the language is changing because, it's sort of like in my housing authority board, we can't get into operations at all and we have no impact whatsoever. We can only vote to implement a policy or vote to have the director implement a procedure. That's all we can do. We don't have any other control whatsoever. And so again,
Who appoints a director?
who appoints a director? That's the board.
That you
Okay?
do that.
That's the
Yeah.
only power. We hire and fire the direct, but that's it. And then we set policy. So that's our only control. But in this case, even if you're doing those things, I guess they can hire and fire and renew the town administrator's contract, but he now has total control over all the other leadership of all the other departments. And that's just not good government, in my opinion. So anyway, enough from me.
Yeah,
Maybe we need a government oversight committee. Patterned after Washington DC.
I think
I think Joe
easiest
said a
way-
good point about the new additional powers to the town administrator. So after we get done with the budget, I'm up for talking about that before we go to meeting and have to swallow this forever.
Okay,
Okay, we can talk about it next week.
okay.
I'll set meetings for. Okay,
Want to do the minutes?
yeah.
Sure.
Bob
Sorry,
sent
Bob,
out
I didn't read the minutes, but
You
the,
didn't? I
I'll-
showed.
because I haven't opened, I got your email, but I just did not print that off, so I'm gonna do it right now.
I read them and they sounded correct to me.
Okay, well then I'll take your word for it, John.
So I'll take a motion to approve the sets of minutes that Bob sent out. They're the dates, what are the dates for, Bob, of the minutes?
I don't know. I didn't bring that folder upstairs.
Here,
Okay, hold on.
okay,
just
let
a
me
minute.
go find your email then.
If you look at the email, that
I'm gonna go look at it right, okay, let's see, where are
And you can get the dates because it's part of the title.
Okay,
From,
okay, so you've got 5:10, you've got 5:12 and 5:13.
right, May 10th and
May
13th. The
10th,
minutes-
May 12th, and May 13th are the 3 minutes that you have.
We'll do this as a consent article.
Sure.
Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from May 10th, 12th, and 13th?
I'll motion.
Do I have a second? I'll second it. Are there any further discussions on those minutes?
No.
If not, then all in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. All right, again, I encourage you to write down any thoughts you have on any of these pieces in the third section and get them to me as soon as you can.
Okay.
And, I'll try to get a little work done tonight and a little tomorrow. Do we have anything else that we need to talk about tonight?
No.
Nope.
Okay, then I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Right?
Thank you. Thank you very much for attending the meeting, everyone.